We have our final presentation today. Last but certainly not least, very important topic. It's way too close to home in our industry. We have our Senior Vice President of Underwriting, John Kostigoff, and we have Underwriting Counsel, South Carolina, Darcy Templeton today. We have a fun theme, as you can see from the title. I'm going to stop talking and then take it away, guys and gal.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're in for a marathon session, and here we are for the last hour. So hold off on those cocktails at least until you're done. Well, I guess we can't see you, so you can enjoy those cocktails.
Okay. John, do you want me to get us started?
Yes, please, please. Thank you.
Hop in anytime. Okay. All right. So our topic today is basically we call it the Scooby Doos and Scooby Don'ts of seller impersonation in real estate. You know, every time I go to a continuing education seminar, there seems to be something about fraud. There seems to be something about ways that agents can get stuck into a mess of things with folks who don't actually, who are not actually the real parties in transactions. I mean, every time I see this stuff, I think surely this cannot be happening still for all the years that we've been doing this in the industry. But 2025 has proven me wrong. It has been a very big year for fraud, huge year for seller impersonation. So we thought it's something worth going back through. I'm sure you've heard it 100 times, but we have some real world examples and some real world things to try and help protect you. Okay. So understanding seller impersonation. First off, as it implies, seller impersonation fraud involves fraudsters who are impersonating legitimate property owners to illegally sell real estate. Okay. We are trying to help you recognize the methods that they employ to help you mitigate risks and protect property transactions. Okay.
And at the outset, let me just jump in. Sorry about that, Darcy. I mean, the term now, of course, the term of art being used is seller impersonation, but it's really forgery, right? Fraud, forgery, and forging deeds. That's nothing new. As long as there's been property and ways to transfer property, there have been people pretending and committing forgery. So now they're just using new technology, and we call it seller impersonation, forgery, right?
Right. That's correct. The difficulty we have now is that there are also some additional endorsements that would provide forgery protection for the things that we do in title insurance. So it's becoming more important for us to be able to see it, sniff it out before it becomes something that catches someone in a net. Drew, if you want to go to the next slide. So again, quick, easy definition. It occurs when criminals impersonate an actual property owner using their personal identification, using social security numbers, sometimes driver's licenses, mechanisms by which they reach out via email, trying to sell property that isn't theirs. Okay. It is not just in residential transactions. It is also in commercial transactions. And it threatens really the integrity of the real estate market, because if you cannot trust that you have the right party, how do transfers happen? And if these transfers can go forward without sufficient verification that you've got the right folks, you have lots of problems that can go forward. Next slide. Okay. Gosh, they use fraudsters will often use sophisticated tools. Okay, they use stolen ID, fraudulent credentials, things without an owner's knowledge, and there's a lot out there that says they try to mask their identities, making detection more challenging. But I have to say that you would expect that this would all be online. that these are things that happen all online. And I will tell you, we have seen things come through in our state that are handwritten documents that are coming in on engagement letters, that people who are intended fraudsters are actually reaching out with written documents now, not coming necessarily by a means that you would expect that this just got pulled from an email or a mail address that was not initially correct. Okay, so yes, they try to look like they are the right folks. They try to look like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and get this notary to sign this for me, and you've got a notarization potential. I don't know how many of our agents out there are notaries. I can tell you it doesn't require a whole lot to get a stamp. I don't know. What do you think, John? You think it's pretty easy to get out there and just get a notary stamp from Staples?
Everything's available online.
Yeah.
So you can't just trust the document because it's allegedly notarized by a notary. We have found that even if you go online to check the validity of that notary as to whether that notary is a licensed individual, since that information's online, anyone can go online, get the name of the notary, get their notary registration or license number, whatever that happens to be called, and then go online and order a notary stamp. So we can't rely like we used to be able to rely upon documents that are acknowledged in front of a notary and stamped by a notary. It's a scary situation. Time and again, we have seen documents presented that look legitimate, and there's a real notary, and we find that either A, the notary stamp was stolen from the notary, or B, the notary stamp just happened to be ordered online. You can get anything. You can get fake IDs. It doesn't matter. You can get any type of fake document, and with computers, you can create any type of document. But as Darcy mentioned, sometimes these documents are handwritten. So need to caution you, and I may say this several times. When you get a document in because you were requiring that document in order for you to pass title, you need to read the document. You need to read it to make sure that it's a legitimate document. You need to read it to make sure there aren't any crazy errors or mistakes or misspellings in it, which would give you a warning that not everything is as it seems to be. It's you can't just take the document, oh, I got the death certificate, and move on. You need to look at these documents. So Darcy.
Do next slide. So the problem with fraud as an impersonating seller is how quickly that fraud is discovered post-transfer. It is not immediate. Typically, it's months, years for the actual property owner to even know that that property fraud has occurred. Okay. It's often because the types of property that we see that in are things that you would not expect to have an immediate response from a party. So you see it a lot in vacant land transactions where you have parties who are listed as sellers that may have property in, for example, in my state, in the state of South Carolina, but may live in New York. They're not actually actively looking at a vacant piece of property that maybe was farmland that their family had conveyed to them via inheritance. And so it's really easy for a bad actor to step in, sell the property. Person's in New York and they're not coming to visit that farmland, they're never going to see it. They're never going to realize that there is maybe something else on that farmland that shouldn't exist now. They may not realize that they're not getting a tax bill anymore. Lots of things happen that way. Folks who have older folks who have been on title for a long time where that party may have passed away and the heirs don't necessarily know. Same thing, you're not getting a tax bill. They don't realize that property is even out there to transfer. But eventually they're going to realize it. Eventually somebody's going to say, hey, wait a minute, what about great grandma's property in, Orangeburg? And when that happens, that's when that fraud's going to be discovered. Problem is, your fraudster is long gone with the money from the buyer. Your buyer now has said, okay, well, we sold this property. You were the one that handled the transaction. Why didn't you know that this was not the person that should have been the one signing? Okay, and by the time all that happens, that money's in the wind. It's never going to come back. Well, I say never. It is very unlikely that it's going to come back. And the party who was the agent involved in that process is the next party that people look to for, how did this happen? Fix my problem or pay me for the problem that was out there. And so that's a problem for us as agents. What do you think, John? Any
Yes,
comments?
yes. And as Darcy said, they're looking, these fraudsters, they are specifically targeting properties where the owner is not going to be living there. So you're looking at vacation rentals or second homes at the beach, in the mountains, at the lake, wherever. Obviously, people aren't there all the time. That makes it easier to commit fraud, because no one's home, no one's investigating, no one's reviewing the property. So they're using whatever resources are available online. They might even have an accomplice, or they may even be somewhat familiar with the area, and they'll do their research on the ground. With regard to estates, obviously someone has died. That person's no longer living in the house, right? Because they're dead. So they look up estate and probate records and to see if there's properties. They're looking at obituaries, because obituaries, we want to see an obituary when we're looking at estate, a property that's coming out of an estate, because we want to make sure that we can double check all the bona fides of the information that we're being given. So it's not just the sophisticated identity theft people that commit fraud. You've got fraud committed by perhaps one heir who claims to be the only heir, but then conveniently forgets to tell us about the 5 siblings that they have. Obviously, we get those too, but that's not the type of claim that we're talking about. So they look at the obituary, because then that gives them the name of the children, and they can then take the identity of the children and then come off as the executor of the estate and provide you fake copies with that. So anytime you're dealing with a scenario where you have a property being sold by someone that doesn't reside at that property, or if you're dealing with a fiduciary situation as an executor or personal representative, you have to be very, very careful and check all this information. One of the things to look at, Darcy mentioned, maybe they're living in New York and they own property in Texas. Well, your tax records, when you're running the tax records, they will disclose the address that the tax bills are being sent to. If you're given a different address for the residents, for these quote unquote sellers, that immediately should be a warning. And don't be comforted by the alleged fact that these sellers actually moved and that was their old address. You need to reach out to the people as listed in the tax records to confirm, are you really selling this property? We had a situation where the agent had that information in their file, that the tax records consistently for the last 20 years, these people in fact lived in Texas, and the property was being sold in New Jersey, so vacant property. And the person says, oh, no, we moved a long time ago. Oh, okay, fine. And so they went with that. That's not sufficient. That's not good. You can't trust anybody. You may want to believe them, but you need to verify this information.
Right. That's right. Jerry, you ready for the next slide? Okay, so there are some ways that sellers can protect themselves. Some counties in some states have now offered property monitoring services. I know there are some counties here in South Carolina that would give that opportunity to basically log in and get notifications if anything shows up against a particular property. They are very helpful in terms of being able to give notifications for folks who are actually looking, who are actually concerned about, hey, I have this property that might be vacant in the state, and or that I'm not actively monitoring, that I need to make sure if anybody puts a deed in my name or tries to transfer it out or tries to put a mortgage out there, that they get a ping on a notification. And that's great. But a lot of this stuff are things where people are not actively, again, monitoring those properties. And sometimes they're not even thinking about the fact that they still have a property even in a particular location. So it's got good and bad. But if you have the opportunity and you have a seller who's concerned and you have a county that will let you do it, yeah, suggest to them that they might sign up for that monitoring service, because they'll get some notification, at least. And if you get a notification and you are monitoring it, you have a better shot at being able to stop that fraud there than you do 6 months forward.
The monitoring service certainly helps the homeowner himself, but one of the things that we've recommended is that when you get a title order, you send a letter, U.S. mail, to the owner of the property. And where are you going to get that address? The tax records. Obviously, someone can have a very concerted effort to commit fraud and change the mailing address with the taxing authorities. And if you see that, take a look at the prior year's tax bill and see where those tax bills have been mailed to, and then mail the notice that you're handling the sales transaction for this property. So use the U.S. mail in that regard. Do not trust the email address that you're given for the parties. Do not trust the phone numbers and that you're given for these parties when you're dealing with a situation that gives you some cause for concern, especially if you're dealing with property that is vacant or a party that or a property that was owned by someone that died, or a second home or something like that. You have to take those extra steps because this stuff is happening, and it's happening everywhere. And it doesn't matter what state, doesn't matter what community, what county, it's everywhere. So take those extra steps. And this property monitoring services are great, but for our purposes, we need to be the ones that are sending out the notices to people. Hey, thank you for giving us the opportunity to handle the sale of your property. And sometimes thank you for the opportunity to handle the refinance transaction on your property. We think about people are selling the property, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they're putting mortgages on property.
So there are red flags, all right? The property characteristics we've been talking about, the seller behavior, the communication methods, urgency. Your sellers want you to sell property as quickly as possible, because if they can make you go quickly, the likelihood is pretty good that you are going to allow steps that you would normally take to be skipped, which means that they got a better shot at taking the money and running than if you take the time to actually verify all the things. John made a really good point, communications methods. You get lots of folks who will send you stuff in email. Oh, I want to do this in email. I want to close it quickly. I want to do a mail away closing. I'm not going to be present, and I need to do it. We got the contract today, and we want to close it next Friday. That is a lot of red flags for activity that we as agents a lot of times get caught up in the minutia of trying to get things taken care of for our clients, taken care of very quickly, because we've got people who are always pushing us to do that. But if we're going to do a good job and make sure that we have protections against this kind of seller fraud, you've just got to slow down, and you've got to be vigilant in looking at what you're looking at. Next slide.
The other thing to remember is that in the past, we used to think that if the sale came to our office via the normal channel, via a realtor, and there was a listing for the property, that gave some level of comfort. But that's not the case, because these fraudsters will contact realtors and have the realtor sell the property for them. And so you get the referral from a realtor. So right off the bat, your antennas aren't tuned into the fact that there's something wrong with this. Perhaps as you proceed and you find that it's difficult to deal with the seller, then you're becoming attuned to the fact that there's a problem here. But keying on the fact, again, if it's a vacant property or if it's a property that's being sold by an estate, you need, even if it's coming through a realtor, even if it's been on the market for a month or two, that is not a safe, a 100% guaranteed safe sale. You still have to be concerned when you can't see the seller face to face.
So that's exactly right. And as noted, if you've got properties that are listed below market value, that's something that can be a possibility. One thing we hadn't seen that on, but previously as much, but have seen it this year, are tax types. It is still possible to transfer properties via tax title. There are some rules about what we can and can't insure, right? But you can still transfer them. They tend to have contracts that are going to be for less than you would normally see that property for, because the parties may be negotiating the fact that there is not an action to quiet title. And so there's a cost and value to that reduces the sales price in a real way that makes sense to cover the buyer doing that job instead of the seller. But those are all things that when you start looking at all of the details, can add up to fraud pretty quickly. Drew, you want to pop to the next slide?
And keep in mind the tax sale aspect. Tax sales are advertised. So these fraudsters are constantly looking for sources of information that will identify for them properties that can be targeted for this type of fraud.
That's right. And you see suspicious seller behavior, okay? But it doesn't always mean that behavior is fraud, right? So when you talk about things like, hey, I want my proceeds to be wired. Well, in today's age, I would much prefer your proceeds be wired than me issuing a check at table, because I have other security protocol that can be put into place that way. It's not unusual to see parties who want to move about the country and do closings electronically, where places will allow it, or do closings as mail-aways, where places will allow it, where you don't have a party who's as a buyer who's coming in, or you have a seller who is not going to come to closing. That's normal in our industry now, but it leads us to an awful lot of opportunity for fraudulent actors to step in. And it's just a matter of, and we keep saying, be vigilant, be diligent in what you're looking at. But that's really what it boils down to. Drew? And it's always about pressure. It is always about trying to get it done today. All right. I'm not going to be here. For example, I'm not going to be at closing, and I need to get this closed because I need this money for X, and this should be a quick close, right? Well, this isn't something where we have to do really anything, and it's going to be cash, so we should be able to close it tomorrow, right? That's the kind of stuff that you hear. It's the kind of stuff that you see on emails. If somebody is pushing you to get it done faster than would be normally expected, stop, take a breath, and figure out why. Because it may be that they're just anxious, and it may be that they've got somebody on that they think is going to be on the hook. And it is when you are not taking that time is when, almost fail, there will be something that happens that will put you on the hook. Okay. Good.
Another thing with regard to urgency and pressure tactics and unusual seller behavior, if you are dealing with a seller that will not talk to you on the phone, prefers to either email or text you, or will only respond at certain odd hours, you have to be suspicious as to why. If you're talking, or in those cases where you actually can talk to a person, if there is an accent that this person really shouldn't have, you've got someone that lived in Louisiana all their life or lived in Brooklyn all their life, but yet they are talking to you and you've got a decidedly accent of European or Asian type of accent, you should immediately question as to who is this person that I'm talking to.
And that's a really good point, because we have some circumstances where, depending on where you are in the world, because this is not always just actors who are local to your particular state. It's very common for other places in the world. Depending on where you are in the world, the nomenclature for how you present yourself is different. So, for example, in the United States, we're very good. Like John, we know John is John's first name. Koskoff is John's last name. That is not necessarily how names are presented throughout the world. And sometimes you will see that as a mechanism by which you can see, aha, this is not the real person. So, for example, if you have, and this is a real example, you have a party, John Smith, we're going to call him, who has signed a contract. And you've talked to John Smith. But when John Smith calls in, John Smith calls in and says, "Hi, this is Smith." Chances are pretty good that you are not really talking to John Smith, because otherwise you would have introduced yourself as, "Hi, this is John," or John Smith. When that doesn't happen, that should raise a flag, because that is not how we traditionally have identified ourselves here in the States. That, coupled with other things, can create enough of a situation for you to say, hey, this might be real, this might not be real, but it's something that should raise a flag for you. Next. All right. Having verified seller communication. All right. Independently discovered and validated phone number. If you get a phone number on an email address, you are looking to reach out to that party, try and find another way to get that phone number, just because you have something. So you have an example of, hey, here's a phone number to call to verify wire instructions. Don't call the number that's on the email. Find a verified third-party source. You can certainly confirm details through the mail sent to the seller's tax records. Okay, so if you've got, again, John Smith, and John Smith has an address in anywhere South Carolina, and you send something to John Smith's address at anywhere South Carolina via, like, was in the tax records, chances are you're going to get John Smith. You're not going to get this is Smith. Which is pretty important, because then you also let them know that somebody is out there trying to impersonate them, at least with respect to property, potentially with respect to other things.
And this verification method, if you will, is similar, if not identical, to what we ask you to do when verifying a payoff information on a mortgage. You're not going to look at the payoff statement and use the phone number on the payoff statement for verification. You're going to use a phone number that you've already previously verified with regard to contacting that lender for the payoff. So you need to find a verifiable number, and there's different ways of doing that. Google is a great tool, and there are other sources. You can contact us with regard to that as well.
All right, yes, next slide. All right, again, it's sending confirmation information to physically through the mail. We've talked about that already, so next slide. Notary use. So in this age of sending notaries or sending documents out for mailaways, it has become very important to vet your notary. There are a number of notary companies out there that are actually nationwide companies that have verifiable parties as notaries. They are insured to verify that their parties are actually vetted and are the people who are supposed to be going out to locations. If you have a state that is a remote online notarization, and you as the agent can be the party who is acting as the notary, that's another option. But you've got to have a way to be able to prove you have the right person, that you're getting the right document signed, and that the person who is acting as the notary has actually got that authority to do so. And again, there are multiple companies out there that do that service. If that's something that you're going to be doing and you don't have, like South Carolina does not have remote online notarization, we have sort of an amalgamation. So we can't do that where we can send it out and we can act as notary, because the notary has to be in person. But there's a way to address that for notaries, and you got to make sure that you've not got fraud going on. We will not, as an agent, we will not allow folks anymore to say, well, I've got a notary in my company, so I'll just go ahead and get that signed. No, we are going to send someone we have personally vetted to you. We're not just going to let that be whomever you want to sign. Next.
So the bottom line here is, as far as the old mail-away, where you send the document out and then you leave it up to the people to find their own notary, obviously you can't do that anymore. There's just too much fraud. You have to prearrange for the signing of that document. Oh, let me also address another issue. With regards to sending a document, whether you send it overnight to send it to email to someone. In the event you are dealing with someone that claims to be out of the country. In the past, we took great comfort in having them have a document signed at a U.S. embassy or consulate office. We have seen fakes with regard to that as well. The State Department does provide a service where they can verify if a document has been signed or if an employee of a consulate office or embassy is actually an employee there. And we're at the point where you need to use that service to verify that. If these people claim to be out of the country and you don't have enough other indicia to support that this is a real bona fide person and the bona fide seller of the property.
That's right. And so identity verification techniques, there are companies out there now that are very easy to reach out to that have mechanisms by which they can do third-party verification for people to verify that they are who they say they are, where they're coming from, all of the information about any kind of account information they're going to provide, and so on. It's kind of like all the places where you see where someone has said, well, did you ever live at this address? And you're thinking, I haven't lived at that address in 30 years. How did you know that? There are companies specifically out there for that purpose that have legitimate business purpose. I'm trying not to name names of companies. If you have an interest in companies, please feel free to send me a message and I'm happy to send you some of that information, but we're trying not to, give props to particular companies, but they're out there, all right? They ask specific questions related to the property to figure out who they are. You have people, okay, so why are you selling? Well, what do you know about the property? Or is this, do we know, how did you acquire this, farmland or whatever that you have, that you can identify? If the person knows all that information, chances are you're getting towards maybe this person is real. Maybe this person is really the real person. When they can tell you the whole history of how grandmama bought the property, 80 some years ago, and all the people that have been involved in the chain without you having actually looked at any of that, it can be helpful. Next slide. Trying to keep us on time, so. Control the disbursement process, all right? Again, those same companies do wire verification. They require, there are places that you can require that checks are issued for seller proceeds. That doesn't necessarily help you if you have a check that you've sent to a seller somewhere that's just going to sign their name on the back, because not all your banks are verifying that the person that's coming into the bank is the person who should actually be signing. We have seen that this year where checks have been made payable to a party. That party has allegedly signed on the back, given an account number for it, and submitted it to their bank. It's completely not the right person. It's completely fraudulent. As far as this says again, related to the authenticity. John, anything else on that before we go to the next slide? Oh, okay, next slide. All right. Reporting. Super important. If it happens, if you have somebody who you think is a fraudulent actor, okay, even if they are not someone who has gotten away with something, even if you have stopped the fraud, if you've said, ha, you are not the right party, please consider reporting it, okay? You want to report suspicious activity to IC3, local law enforcement, state authorities, all right? If you have notary violations, the Secretary of State's office, report it. Because just because they haven't gotten you or your parties in your transaction does not mean that they are not trying to do it to somebody else, okay? They have the ability sometimes with the information that you can provide to tie that into other potential places where those folks may have tried to engage in fraud. And sometimes when you can put together enough of it, you can actually catch the people who are doing it. That has happened. We have seen it happen with agents and folks, at least in South Carolina. I know certainly in other states. So it's really easy to say, okay, so obviously if you got caught, like if there's somebody that has taken money, yeah, you need to report it. But there are a lot of times when you think, wow, I dodged that bullet. Don't just treat it like that. Treat it like, yeah, we dodged that bullet, but let's go see if we can't find the guy with the gun, because it's going to happen to somebody else. It's going to be another transaction where somebody else is going to get stuck, where some property is going to get sold that doesn't need to, where there is an agent who gets caught in the middle. And if we can stop it, we need to. So, thoughts on that, John?
Absolutely. And the sooner you do it, the better. Not only do these fraudsters try to sell other properties in the area or other properties that were owned by the same person in the case of a decedent that may have had multiple holdings. But they will also repeatedly try to sell the same property. And in fact, I'm thinking about one on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, where there, in the course of 6 months, there were 3 separate attempts to sell the very same vacant lot, a vacant lot in the subdivision. They went to 3 different realtors, and so there were 3 separate attempts by the same people to sell that property. So very important to report the activity.
Next slide. Collaboration with industry partners. You can learn about how all these things are affecting other people in your area by literally talking to them, reaching out to your local land title associations, reaching out to your local listservs for title professionals, hosting educational events that you could have at banks and community involvement to try and get people to understand that this is real and it's really out there. And you will find that you are not the only party who has ever seen this. And when you see how much it happens, it's kind of frightening because you think it's not happening really at all. And then you can be in a room of 10 people and 8 out of 10 of them have had something happen in the past 3 months where someone has come through where they've tried to do something that they're not supposed to do. Fortunately, because of that education, we're catching more of it before it becomes a problem, but it is definitely out there.
Absolutely. Talk to the realtors that you deal with. Talk with the mortgage officers. Talk with the law firms that maybe you're doing business with. Everyone has to be aware of the problem. Everyone has to be educated. Everyone has to know that this is a real issue, that it is happening, and it's happening everywhere.
True. So this is the fun part. These are the real life examples. Yes, it does really happen. Next slide is 3 real life scenarios. Okay, and then so you got one where the sellers were done. They were out of the country. And this I believe is one that came through your office with folks trying to again use embassy and IDs and things that were maybe should have been clear to everybody. Wasn't them.
Yes, absolutely. Sellers are out of the country. This is one where the tax office showed that they actually were residents of the country in Texas. You take a look at you can take a look at the property records in Texas, and they'd lived there for 15 years. But we were advised that they actually have been living in Canada for the last 10 years. And to make matters even crazier, that they were traveling in Vietnam. And if you took a look at the title, these people were in their 80s. Not to disparage older people, I am amongst those ranks, but who in their right mind would be traveling that extensively? And they wanted the money wired to their bank in Vietnam. It's extremely difficult to open up a bank account in another country if you are not a citizen of that other country. Banking regulations are very stringent in that regard. But yet, with all these red flags, there was even an attorney involved that represented the seller. And so the agency was dealing with the law firm that was local, that was representing this out of country, quote unquote, out of country seller. So, and they were provided with a copy of a passport. They were provided with a copy of driver's licenses. And if you take a look at it, hindsight, of course, is 2020. But if you take a look at the pictures look very, very similar, just slightly altered in a sense. And honestly, they look like digital cartoons, if you will. That they weren't real pictures, but they looked real, but not quite real. There was something off about them. You can't trust copies of documents. You can't trust any of that stuff.
So we had another situation where, again, this is one of those red flag kind of properties. Seller has tax title, willing to sell it at a reduced price. All right. In this particular case, the real estate agent who was involved in this process was a buyer. Real estate agent knew the seller, the real seller, was another real estate agent in town. The buyer had been on a chat thread with a bunch of other real estate agents talking about property in the area, and this particular seller reached out to the agent and said, hey, you know what, I have this property on this street. I understand you're interested in that area. Would you be interested in buying it from me? And of course, the agent said, sure. Put together a contract. They send the contract out. Of course, contracts now routinely go via DocuSign. She actually knew the real estate agent that was the real seller. Get information back. All the information comes back in writing. The agent sends, the settlement agent sends out an engagement letter. The engagement letter comes back with handwritten information on it. And as part of the process, we realize there's a tax title. We tell, the agent tells the party, hey, there's tax title. Let's do it on a reduced price. Of course, that seller says, sure, let's do that. Let's see if we can get it closed pretty quick because we're not going to clear title. We're going to take less money. Great. At that point in the process, as part of emails back and forth, somehow the real seller gets involved. And the real seller calls the settlement agent's office and says, hey, I'm the seller for this piece of property, but I'm not selling. I own this piece of property, but I'm not selling it. So tell me what's been going on. I go through all the information. The seller's name is correct on the paperwork. The address for the tax records is correct on the paperwork. The social security number for the seller is correct on the paperwork. The only thing that gives it away, two things. One, the speed at which they wanted to do the transaction, and Smith, John. So signature, John Smith. All right, but it's signed Smith John. It's initialed SJ. And party has been routinely contacting the settlement agent's office. Hello, this is Smith. When are we going to close? All of that was enough to say this party is fraud, right? But there was an awful lot of stuff that was done to get to that point that had you not been looking at how they signed their name, how they answered phone calls, the speed at which things were being like, hey, we want to close this now, might not have been apparent enough to have done anything to say, hey, this is a problem. Party says, I want to go ahead and I want to have proceeds wired and I'm not going to be able to come to closing. All of that stuff was enough to say, wow, that's fraud. And, oh, by the way, real seller, they've got your real social. They've got your real information. So maybe you need to probably do something to protect you as well. We've had parties who have said, hey, I'm out of the country and I can do all this stuff. I want to do all this stuff and I can do it electronically just through email. We got to put eyes on you. Well, let's do a Zoom call. Okay, great. We got to put eyes on you. Let's set that up. Well, but I'm in Australia. Well, that's fine. If anybody knows the time difference between the East Coast and Australia, boy, that means that's a really early phone call. But the agent was smart enough to say, I think this party is fraudulent, and I don't think that they're the right people. So fine, we'll set up a Zoom call where we will be on the call with you. The settlement agent will be on the call with you. We'll do it. You said you want to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning your time. Great. That's outrageously early on the East Coast. We'll do it. And that's what called the bluff, and that transaction stopped. but you've got to be vigilant in all this stuff because they are really actively, it's not just a random email where things are coming out. Oh, you weren't looking at the email address correctly. Everything else was right in these situations, but the one thing that looks like, hey, this probably shouldn't be. And if you're diligent about it, you'll see it. If not, you may be the one that has to try and fix it.
But keep in mind, even if there was a Zoom call, people are using AI. We hear about AI everywhere. And obviously with AI, you can generate something that looks like a person. And then you have to key in to see whether or not this person on the screen is actually moving like a real person, or is this person moving like a product of animation? Animation can be very good. Look at some of the movies that are produced that use animation. So again, don't take for granted that you can trust anything just because in the past it was trustworthy. Nothing is trustworthy any longer.
Drew, I know we have one more poll question, I think, right?
We do.
All right, and we've got a question. We've got questions, I think, in the chat. So do you want to answer the questions in the chat and then do the poll question? Because I think we're at the end of the presentation time.
Yeah, let's do, yeah, you can answer the question in the chat and then we'll do the poll and then wrap it up.
Okay, so the question was, are you suggesting we tell people to use title lock? Not necessarily. There are some, depending on your state where you're located, you may have things that work just as well as title lock, or things that work better. Title lock is not necessarily going to be the quickest result for parties, and certainly not the cheapest. There are more and more counties that are doing these services as an accommodation for their citizens, that cover it the same way. There are more and more states that are requiring that things like electronic documentation, if you're going to submit things electronically for recording, be locked down as to who can actually do them. So for example, in South Carolina, you can electronically record, but it is attorneys' offices that do it, and the attorneys' offices are the ones that get the authority from the county. So it's another way to kind of keep that fraud from just randomly happening by random people submitting documents. Certainly title lock is an option out there. Closing Lock is a company that does those kinds of services, but we can certainly also send you more if you have any other questions. Yes, please.
Did not go. There we go. Now questions.
Questions?
Okay.
Do we have any?
We have, so our county now requires only the seller with an ID record. Sorry, I can't read apparently. Our state now requires only the seller with an ID recorded deed or an attorney or title company only. Not sure if that was a comment or.
So it sounds like that's a way that the counties are trying to avoid having just things randomly come in without any kind of sufficient identification. As an aside, every state that has photo identification has a mechanism by which you can verify that those IDs are in fact real. Each state's got a little bit of a different way of doing it, but on most states there's some measure of hologram. On most states there's some measure of additional identification that you would not normally see. And I'm only using my state as an example. If you have a South Carolina driver's license and you hold that driver's license up to the light, if it is a real driver's license that has actually been taken at the South Carolina DMV, you should be able to see the palmetto tree that is our state emblem that has been basically punctured through the driver's license. So you can, and you can't see it if you're just looking at it on a flat surface, but if you hold it up to the light, it'll shine through a palmetto tree. And so there are things that you in your individual states can find out about your IDs that can help you sufficiently identify them as being real people as well.
This was a question specific or a statement or comment specifically in Arkansas, by the way. It says in Arkansas, only the seller, attorney, or title company can record in person only. So I'm not sure if there's anything to add there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the case in all counties in Arkansas. It may be, but that's not a fail safe either, because if the fraud occurred and was perpetrated on an agent or attorney, and the agent and the attorney are the party that are recording, then that didn't help anything. With a photo ID, then it all depends on the recorder's office. What type of method do they have to actually validate that driver's license or ID? Darcy mentioned a very good method for a South Carolina driver's license. Other states use holograms and various copies. You'll have two copies. You'll have two photos, two images of the photo on a lot of states. But all of that with a computer you can reproduce. Any imaginative 18-year-old going to college can easily and quickly buy themselves a photo ID showing that they're 21, so they can go out and hang out in the bars on Friday and Saturday night. So if they can do that easily, anyone else can do the same.
Just be diligent. That's all you can do. Any other questions, Stuart? Are we good?
I think that was it. Sorry for the click-clack of my keyboard. I was responding to a question furiously, and I have one of those mechanical keyboards that are like a Gatling gun, apparently. So I don't think we have any other questions. John, you sent me some attachments that were, we haven't gotten to this last slide yet. Oh, wait, it is there. The appendix materials list to be provided. I haven't taken a look at the attachments that you sent me just yet. If any clarification needed for those materials, if they're to be sent out to attendees here?
If you've got the one that's labeled the New Jersey driver's license, if there's a way for you to put that up, because it addresses the issue, or just goes to the issue of whether or not a document that looks like a valid license is something that you can trust. If you could put that on the screen real quick.
Is it in the?
Darcy was talking about a scenario where they had all of the seller's information, the social security number, the address, the driver's license number. Well, that's the Texas one, but even so, interesting. If you look at the picture, there's something off about that picture. It doesn't look like a real life picture. I mean, and same with this one. They don't look like real life pictures. I mean, they're pictures of individuals, but they look animated, if you will. However, they had the proper information. They had all the information on these two individuals, but the pictures weren't of them. And in fact, no one at the table saw the seller, so the realtor couldn't identify the seller if they saw them, and obviously the title agent involved couldn't identify them either. But you could see they've got all these features that a regular driver's license would have, so you can't rely on the fact that, oh yeah, I've got it, it looks good. You can't rely on that.
Okay, well, what would probably be helpful, I don't know if you feel differently, if maybe schedule some time to mark this up and point out what looks off, and then send it out to interested people once we do that? I mean, is it ready to send out now, or do you think it would benefit?
Well, I think what we can do is we can redact these somewhat and then pull together some other examples, and then yeah, maybe we can have a special half hour just on photo IDs.
The technology is getting better and better. Creates
Absolutely.
more scary situations. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you look at the backside of the driver's license, the driver's license will be coded and it will repeat information on the backside that's on the front side, such as the date of issuance, the date of expiration, and the birth date. If you have inconsistencies there, automatically you know it's a fake ID.
wonderful. Yeah, I think we should do our due diligence on making sure that people are spotting the areas where the technology might have some gaps and let people know where it might be fraudulent. So sorry to not have that ready now, but I don't want to send you something that isn't as helpful as possible.
Okay.
But other than that, do we have any other questions? Because otherwise, thank you, truly thank you, everyone, for hanging out today.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, you took up a good chunk of your day. You guys are busy, so thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll be starting in 2026. We'll be offering a regular monthly credit. This was kind of a precursor to that routine. So stay tuned for those announcements and hope everyone has an awesome day. Thank you.
Signing off. Bye-bye.